Tetragammaton.
Now, I don't want to make this whole thing about death, but I just the thoughts of which I'll repeat, but that comment my mother made as she was dying, who's a lifetime atheist and communist and didn't believe in anything past this. And I asked her, "Are you afraid?" when she was kind of at the end, and she said she was curious. And I thought, well, that was a good place to start with something. And then you sent me that beautiful poem about that when we're not watching ourselves, maybe somebody else is watching us as we move through something else, And I loved your book, by the way. I have it right behind me here. It'll stay here now forever.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you like it.
I thought it was beautifully architectured. And then, in all ways.
Are all stories good for the same reason?
I think they might be because I think you get to unleash the use of words into ideas. Trying to as a writer, trying to put the best word in front of the other. Some people are way better at it than others, just to relate two well-known artists, a writer named Dennis Johnson, who I think was one of the great American writers, wrote a short story called Jesus' Son that is pretty well recognized as one of the great short stories. And then more recently, I've been friendly with George Saunders, who's a wonderful combination of words and science. I tried to sort of compete with them in emails. It's like a joke. It's like talking to a poet. But I think it's how they've learned, as the great writers have, or great artists, same thing with painting or something, being able to put one brushstroke in front of another to communicate an idea. So in that sense, I think all storytelling is the same. And that's just how good you're able to do it. But I think it's a cliche probably, but probably true that everybody does have a story to tell. It's like I always believe there's somebody for everybody, same kind of thing.
Do stories need a structure, and do they need the same structure?
I would say neither is true. I think that's up to the artist. It's however they best communicate. I mean, you know that better than anybody with music, that somebody will make just a sound, and that sound will be everlasting, and someone else will do it a different way. I'm pretty traditional in my structure, very Shakespearean, not that I'm Shakespeare, but even though I think Shakespeare said the two greatest lines in the English language, exit ghost. You can think about that for a while. But yeah, I think you need that. So what's scaring me with AI a little bit, it's now it learns dramatic function of Shakespeare. So he knows about catharsis and act structure and and that will then use that to obviously, increase its ability to tell stories. But I think people can tell stories any way they can. I think you just do what you think is comfortable. I think one thing I've learned, and I think I learned this oddly a little bit from Bob Dylan, just by osmosis, that anything's culturally appropriate in a sense that you can use anybody else's work if it encourages you, it creates for you something that you hadn't thought about. And then it becomes a wide kind of mass of what bubbles over in you, something maybe beautiful or corny, or that I remember was writing something, and there was a Emmylou Harris duet with, I think, Lefty Frizzell or somebody, and it was always very moving to me, and it always kind of it just stuck with me. But it helped me to then use that to appropriate that to not the particular song, but that sound, whatever that felt like, to be able to try to articulate that. So I think there's, haikus, and there's, I wrote a movie a long time ago and I haven't told this story, so not that much, for Kurosawa, and he had asked me to help make an Anglo character in his movie called Rhapsody in August, and we talked through a translator, but he'd sent me the script, which was translated, and it was like a haiku. I mean, it was just so beautiful, just an ant on an ant hill, and however he was describing things, and it really quite lovely. And then I realized I wrote in this kind of Jewish, intellectual, psychiatric, kind of prosy, you know. It was so different from what the beautiful way he was explaining things. And you know, any artist will do things differently than another. And but I think they all kind of have to borrow from each other and also have to learn through some experience, you know. So you don't get to be Kandinsky or something without spending the time, you know, learning to be Kandinsky. And you don't get to be Rick Rubin without learning how to be you.
On the psychological note, have you ever done therapy?
I have some, not much. I had done it individually for a while in like late 60s, early 70s. I found myself kind of straying with my married life, let's put it that way. And I did a lot of hallucinogenics, all kinds, you know, with privately and also with like people like Jerry Garcia and stuff. I mean, in other words, lots of, you know, acid tests and everything else. And yeah, I had one psychiatrist I found was very enlightening, let's put it that way. And my problem is I get too hung up on kind of the style of the psychiatrist. But they've been incredibly helpful. And then it became psychologists, obviously, when they started just prescribing drugs. She was pretty amazing. Yeah, she wasn't intrusive at all. Very sensitive, but I thought she led us in great areas. Yeah, so that's psychiatry to me.
How did you connect with a police psychologist?
Somebody made a recommendation, just her being really strong. And yeah, I mean, she was really unobtrusive and let us kind of fight it out, you know, where we had to and love it out where we could. And it was important, yeah. She was a great facilitator that way. Have you done much psychiatry at all?
Done a lot of therapy of different kinds. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, yeah. And I think it's important, yeah,
been helpful.
yeah. I think that's part of what when I sort of introduce myself to you, that I wanna go back to that in some form or fashion, whether it's with a Orthodox rabbi or you know, a shaman, you know?
What motivated you to reach out in the first place?
No, this is why, because I've been having these kind of incredible, I call them the porch sessions, you know, these guys during, I don't know why, it's right before, I guess more during the pandemic, people just started coming over, want to sit on the porch and talk, and we could talk 6 feet away. And I don't know, I think it's more they were like old man Roth, you know, what does he have to say? And all these people just started showing up, you know, it's like sometimes announced, sometimes not announced. And they've always been, I'm sorry I didn't tape them, even though I understand since we have a Ring camera, they're all on there. And I was talking to Judd Apatow, who we both know together, and a couple other people too who love you, James Gray and a few other people, and really kind people. And I was saying, I've just been enjoying this enlightening conversation about things that I wouldn't necessarily normally think about, you know, and how does it affect my work and my children and everything. And everybody said Rick Rubin. And so it was pretty easy, you know. And then I figured when I text you, you would just never text back. And I thought that was cool too, you know, that'd be fine. But you've been very generous with your time.
Tell me about the first time you took a hallucinogenic drug.
Wow. First time I was with a group of people in Haight-Ashbury, truthfully, which sounds kind of corny. And someone said, try this. And I'm always willing to try, you know, and I've had some pretty scary things, but not, I mean, where I never minded like the floor opening up, you know, or all of a sudden I was, you know, sitting in a cloud, or I think I had once experience of feeling like I was having an affair with Time magazine, which was pretty interesting. You know, I don't know what that was all about, but I never felt that I was going to become psychotic, you know, but I could see how it could become psychotic for somebody who has really tremendous fear, you know, and unresolved things. But I think, you know, from just playing with marijuana and stuff, you know, and having a lovely time through the whatever, you know, the eroticism of it, or just the taste of a brownie or some nonsense, you know, but that I always felt it was expansive to my mind. I never liked cocaine though. I just don't like that feeling. I mean, I guess I'm more toward, I'm not advocating this anyway, but heroin or something, you know, more mescaline then, or, But, I mean, I think drugs have their purpose, and I guess it's, I've always been interested in trying to find out what's the limits of what I'm trying to think about, and where all this comes from. I mean, to me, the greatest story, what I said to Bob Dylan, with the Bob Dylan thing, was that in his book called Chronicles, he talks about, he was at the time with Daniel Lanois, who I'm sure you knew or know quite well. I think he's gone now. But he was struggling creatively, Bob Dylan, and he took a trip out to, like, the Bayou, because they were, I think, working in New Orleans or something, and they went out to Lafayette. And he said he had walked into, in his book, he said he'd walked into a gift shop, and he sort of found the secret to everything. It was a card that said, "World's Greatest Grandpa." And so that somehow put together whatever he was struggling with, And I thought, yeah, sometimes it's the most simple thing. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're the same person now as you were before you took any hallucinogens?
No, not at all. I think the same person's in there, but I think it's been reinformed in a way, that at least it opened up the possibilities of things. But I don't want to emphasize this because my life hasn't been, particularly about that. I mean, I think that's a nice afterthought in a sense. I mean, I'm way more interested in, for me, for the creative process is really important. And these things that I mentioned earlier about what sources am I taking this from? What I do as a screenwriter is kind of a bastardized form of, it's more of a craft than an art. You can be artful at it. But it's not a novel. You don't have to fill a page up, a lot of ellipses and half thoughts, but strong visuals, and but it's a form of writing, and it's like I've been lucky enough to people have appreciated, I think, some of the things I had to impart, One of my proudest was more recently with the actor Josh Brolin. I had written a play of High Noon that he was considering, and he was very close, and I wrote a play of High Noon because they had never had a drama on Broadway, a Western drama on Broadway. And I was told that Josh was telling people about, he decided not to do it, but that his philosophy at the time, at least more recently, was a Scott Fitzgerald story, more of an essay to an extent about life and death and this and that. And he was telling people about it. It turned out I had written it. It was from when I did Benjamin Button, and I had written a speech toward the end of it. And it was actually a speech that Nora Ephron asked me who was planning her funeral, asked me if she could use it. But it's funny how they attributed it to Scott Fitzgerald, who I couldn't hold a candle to, But in this one instance, it's pretty powerful, I think, about just about life and about how there's no rules or anything, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, and and if you're not succeeding at what you want to, you can just stop and change it, It's easier said than done, obviously, but that at least you can if you have the courage to go and try something else.
Yeah, the idea of a Western on Broadway is a really cool idea. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a pretty powerful play. The play itself is very powerful. It's about the blacklist, really, and the movie was, and Gary Cooper and all, and sort of American iconography of the whole thing, and it's about guns, and but I think I made it in hopefully a contemporary way, and I mean you'd appreciate this since this is your métier anyway. I'm trying to put some contemporary music in it so that it feels, and the songs are all apt. I mean, there's that Ry Cooder song, "Across the Borderline," and then somebody you know quite well, and I actually knew earlier than you, Johnny Cash song, which was from Nick Lowe, the "Beast in Me," which he used on The Sopranos. Yeah, when I was younger, I was asked by the cabaret department at William Morris. I was a client of William Morris, and I was pretty young, to travel with a bunch of artists, and they were all just kind of basically jerking off, wanting these little video ideas, There was no MTV then or anything, and so I rode on the buses with Johnny, with the Cash family, and that was really interesting. And then Van Morrison was singing with his back to the audience at that point, and then of course, great Jerry Garcia, So.
How much do your experiences work their way into your work?
Well, I think they do, but I try to make it what I think it's more about what the feeling is than the experience itself necessarily. I mean, the best kind of writing, which I still don't think I've mastered in any way, is subtextual writing, which is probably true about music too, or certainly about filmmakers. I think Marty Scorsese is a great subtextual filmmaker because he, even in like Taxi Driver, all of a sudden there'd be some graffiti on a wall that he decided to show you, but the graffiti didn't say anything of any value. It was just a sense this is an art and this is part of the city. So he expressed a lot that way. But, the worst kind of writing is kind of Ernie the Explainer. It's like, good morning, Mr. Water Commissioner, that kind of writing. So you want to try to find a way to have someone articulate what their most intimate concerns are through some other story about something, if you're creating it, fine, or if it's a true story, it comes from life and that says the same thing without having to do this kind of thing with big headlines. It's a hard thing to do. I think the great musicians do it. I mean, I think they do it through the lyrics are just spectacular, where they don't necessarily talk about what they're talking about, but you know what they're talking about.
As nutrition science advanced through the mid-20th century, researchers began to understand that modern eating patterns, limited variety, processed foods, and time constraints could leave small but meaningful gaps in daily micronutrient intake. Today, large population studies confirm that approximately 90% of adults fall short on one or more essential vitamins or minerals. AG1 was formulated in response to those findings. Each daily serving provides more than 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced nutrients, including vitamins A, C, E, B6, B12, magnesium, zinc, selenium, and iodine. A scientifically developed formula backed by nutrition research and delivered in forms the body can readily access. Because utilization depends on absorption, AG1 also contains probiotics to support gut health and digestive function, helping the body make effective use of what it receives. AG1 contains no gluten or dairy, uses no genetically modified ingredients or artificial sweeteners, and is suitable for a wide range of dietary approaches, including plant-based, paleo, keto, and low-carbohydrate diets. Available in single-serving packets for when you're on the go. Manufactured under strict quality controls, every batch of AG1 is tested to confirm its composition, nutrient levels, and the absence of contaminants, ensuring reliability from one serving to the next. It's no wonder AG1 is trusted by the world's top athletes and experts. What was once a futuristic concept, daily nutritional support in a glass, is now the result of applied science. Learn more at drinkag1.com/Tetra. Do it today.
When you're adapting a story, how do you decide what's important enough to keep and what you can let go of?
That's a great question because, every book that's been given to me, I sit and I read it, right? And I start underlining what I think this could be dramatically interesting in this. And all of a sudden, the whole book literally is underlined. So now what do I do, But I think it also gives you a sense of which you're very smart about as to what you're not going to use. Because you can start coalescing things into where one dramatic moment takes care of 4 or 5. Now, I always warn the author that it might not seem akin to what you wrote, but it will be. In other words, so I hope it will make it better if that's possible. Or at least it's just a different form. Because I guess my calling is I'm a dramatist, I guess, right? Hopefully some humor along the way. But that if I'm able to somehow express the human condition in an honest way, and somebody could take something from it, just even as entertainment, something as farcical as Forrest Gump or something, which was silly at its heart, but there's something was constant about it. And then there are, I think, some more sophisticated movies like The Insider that I did and a few others that I think articulated things that were important, society.
Tell me the story of The Insider.
The Insider was a guy who wanted to basically get his pension. That's all it was. He was going to retire. His wife was a daughter of a tobacco farmer. He was a very complicated man because he was a scientist, legitimate scientist, had a PhD in something, chemistry or something. But you wonder what he was thinking. He was working for the tobacco company, so he was sort of advocating, the poison that they were putting out there. And he knew all about it, knew what was wrong. He could tell you in a second about the blood-brain barrier. And I happened to smoke at the time, so I was aware of it. I couldn't talk to him, though, because he was under a kind of a hold from the government. He wasn't allowed to talk. So we had to create kind of a guy in whole cloth. I mean, who was this man? But the first thing I remember saying, what kind of guy is a tobacco scientist? And he didn't want really very much. He just wanted to retire and wanted his pension wasn't even very much. But when they said, we're not going to give you your pension, he said, well, I'm going to start talking about what's wrong with this industry, And he was pretty brave. He was a pretty brave guy. He was a very prickly guy when I finally did get to meet him. Anyway, that was a story, and it dovetailed with 60 Minutes, the television show. They did a report on him, and then they squelched it because the tobacco companies didn't want it, but also the government was kind of involved, and it became very complicated with the personalities. Mike Wallace, the interviewer, the great journalist, because I think he was a great journalist. He was unafraid, and so they tried to not run the story, and which made the producer nuts, and said, "What about the integrity of CBS?" And so it became a lot about honorability, And I remember Mike Wallace calling me, journalist. There was a man named Lowell Bergman whose story it was. He was a producer of the thing. He was very brave, and he was a great reporter. And he was yelling at me, Mike Wallace, well, what makes Lowell Bergman the moral fucking arbiter and this and that. So I just wrote it down. So it's in the movie.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it any better,
Yeah. How often does that happen where real life works its way into the story?
If you have real life people, and this happened in this Killers of the Flower Moon, where we imagined various things that we wanted the Osage to say, and then there was no way I could say it as well as, or Marty or anybody else could say it as well as the real people. I mean, we could give them sort of the ideas we want maybe them to express, and then they turned it into what was affecting them as human beings and their life stories, So I could have never written that. I'm a kid from Brooklyn, I have no clue. The only other instance that comes right off the top of my head, it would be on Star is Born. I said to Lady Gaga, let's just sit down here and talk, and I'll write dialogue for you from what you're telling me, So if you see, and Bradley did the same thing, Cooper, and like the scene in the parking lot where they're just sitting sort of bullshitting, all that, most of that's written. But it made her comfortable, so that when the real person shows up, they have, either limitations or abilities that you don't even know. And she's an interesting human being because the thing that was so striking about her, we were doing a read-through, and the songs were in there. There was no need for anybody to sing them. Bradley Cooper would just sort of talk them through, but she started singing, and God showed up, I'm sure you know that. She has something.
Amazing.
Yeah, that you can't. So you have to work with, I think, who the person is. I mean, old story. Russell Crowe he didn't understand certain thing about his character in The Insider, so Michael Mann had me fly down to Louisville. He said he won't come out of his trailer, all that nonsense. And so I went in there and did Rick Rubin with him and said, is there a way we can find a happy medium here? And I explained the scene again to him, and he said, I'll try it, eventually. And Michael, the director, was just trying to avoid having a continuing fight with him, which wouldn't have been very productive.
Let's use that case as an example. When there's a logjam like that, what's really going on? What's it really about?
I think he had fear. He was afraid, In other words, and if an actor feels he doesn't understand it, whether he's right or wrong, I mean, you need to find a way to articulate to them what you intended. And that doesn't mean you end up with the exact same thing. For The Insider, again, I got a call one morning from Al Pacino saying I had written like a page and a half monologue, and Al said I could do this with one look. And I said, let me ask Michael. I have no problem with it. And so Michael said, let's shoot it both ways. And they left the look in. All the words I wrote were out the window, because he could do it without necessary. And I said, that's fine.
As a writer, that's something that you can't account for or prepare for an actor who can get the story across without saying the words. There's no way to prepare for that. There's no way to write for that.
No, except for I think after a while you get the experience of that. Certainly less is more if you can, even though I think there's some great monologues. And then as some directors just go like this, cut. We'll take it out. Because I had a thing recently on I think a particularly beautiful movie that I just finished called Here. We'll see if it works. It might be a disaster. It's all set in one room over 100 years in a house, and the camera's locked off, so there's no coverage. It's just one angle. But the stories are beautiful of what the people that live there, and so you don't know what to anticipate, But I feel the storytelling is very solid.
How did that come about?
Bob Zemeckis, the director, Forrest Gump, and I have a nice relationship over the years, and I've done some other work for him. And he called me. He felt it's a graphic novel called Here, and the artist drew everything from this point of view. Everything was one way through a window. Well, not through a window, but you see a window in the back. So he said, you have the right melancholy for it. So maybe I do. I don't know. But I also have a sense of my mortality, which is what it's about eventually, So I could write that. And then he put in some, he's very humorous and kind of farcical and lovely. And but it's about everything, because the dinosaurs walk through, because anything that happened in that property, marsh birds, and it's quite beautiful. We'll see. Maybe it won't work. I think the tone is right. I start crying like a baby in the first 5 minutes, but I think it was because the Rachel Portman music was on it. That was really beautiful, So I don't know, but we'll see.
How do most projects originate? Does it usually start with you getting a call from a director, or what are the different ways that a project will happen?
I think there's every one you can imagine, like we did one recently I did with my son called Walt Grace. It's from a John Mayer song, an old John Mayer. I don't know if you know the song. John loves it. And I didn't know John, but my son asked me, do you think this is a good idea for a movie? I said, it's great. It's about a guy who is kind of trapped in life, doesn't have a great relationship with his wife. He has one kid that does love him, one kid doesn't, or doesn't have a good relationship with him. And he has kind of a Groundhog Day life. He designs wings for like Lockheed. It's supposed to be set in 1967. And he decides to build a submarine in the basement, which I don't know how he's going to get it out of there. But in ours, it's like an outbuilding, a garage. And sure enough, he takes off in a homemade submarine where he's got, propellers are made of fans and from the ceiling, and he's gone to the junkyard. And it's spectacular. So there's also a feeling of Yellow Submarine with it, I think. But it's quite lovely, I think. We have some people who seem to want to do it actually now. So we'll see. And John Mayer will do the music, I guess. But so that's one way it came. Things come. Others are just books sent to me, would I be interested? And it's really about the subject. And then directors, Denis Villeneuve asked me to rewrite Arrival, which I did. And then he asked me to do Dune, so we had a relationship. And Dune was a little complicated for me because it wasn't my favorite book ever written, but it was an interesting assignment as to how to make this the best, and I tried,
It's one that's been attempted many times over the years, and has
there's been at least
history.
One. Yeah. It's tricky. I think he did a good job. I think it's my problem with it was, I'm being a little too honest probably, but that there's a character named Duncan Idaho in it. Now, this isn't a translation. I mean, we're supposed to be millions and millions. I said, where does this name come from? I understand it's a translation of whatever you want, Jammo Jacka, but it's not. But I think it's a prodigious book because he invented a glossary and a geography and everything else. And it was a surprise. I mean, I think Star is Born was the most important movie in the more recent times, not because it's a great movie. I think it is a good movie. And certainly I love the fact it put me more in touch with the young people, because young people really seem to enjoy it, even though it's an old story. But it made me feel vital, you know? And so I was in my 70s, so I said, you can still write that, huh? That, I think, gave me I'm not saying I was done, but it did so well, and then all of a sudden they figure I know something still, which is ridiculous.
Is it different writing for a theatrical release versus something that's going to be watched on a streaming service?
Well, that's a great question, because I have tremendous guilt about, I began House of Cards. So Fincher, who's my best friend, I guess, in the world, one of the more loyal people you would ever meet, and I hope you have a time to meet him, he decided to do it with me. And I had actually been aware of it from earlier when we had seen the English version, that Pacino and I and Michael Mann were going to make it as a movie, because it's just Richard III. It's like, you think these guys are so tough? Watch me go in this room and fuck them. And then he'd go in the room and fuck them.
How's the English version? I've never seen it.
It's the same thing, basically. It's just that the guy is not, he never wants to go past the station in life he is, which is sort of the whip of the party. In other words, and he's going to just manipulate everybody. It's Succession in that way, I guess, or Succession is that, And, but it caught on. I wanted to sell it to HBO, figuring we'd just get water cooler conversation like The Sopranos or something. But people started binging it, and all of a sudden these eyeballs became available. And I'm not happy about particularly the results, I still, fortunately, get to write movies that doesn't mean they don't go right on streaming, but they start at least with the idea of, but the only one, I think, if there hadn't been a pandemic, I think Dune would have played for quite a while. But with the pandemic, people just sat and watched at home.
Is there any benefit in that idea of binge watching or episodes that you can tell a story over 6 hours, 10 hours, season after season, as opposed to having to get it into a 2-hour film?
I've just been presented with that, and I'm not sure the answer. It's the same Dennis Johnson. I thought, how come they haven't done a movie about the guys who've come home from war, right? Because every other era has done The Best Years of Our Lives, a movie called The Men that Marlon Brando was in. Coming Home, of course, famous one about Vietnam. So they haven't done that for this war, like these wars, the Afghanistan, Iraq stuff, and the guys are obviously in bad shape. And so I was going to write that, and Spielberg came to me with something else, and I started conflict, and the head of the studio said, why don't you just sell it to HBO? So I did. And they said, who do you want to write it? I said, Dennis Johnson. They didn't know who he even was. And I said, I'm getting him. And he wrote 5 of the most amazing scripts. They're called Unarmed. Everybody in it's an amputee or a burn victim. And the only triumph of it is one guy to walk across the street to leave. And it is so spectacular. And it's all written, as I say, in this subtextual way. And we're close now. Catherine Bigelow might do it. But it's important, I think. And we get to use we would have all disabled actors, disabled veterans, and disabled civilians. And I think it'd be pretty incredible. I mean, years ago, I was going to do Cuckoo's Nest. And my agent said, they'll never make it. Jack Nicholson was not involved. And I was friends with Michael Douglas, really good friends. And so I went off to do a movie called Onion Field. But then they got Jack Nicholson, and I went, oh, my God, I fucked the dog here, man. But I did come back and do rewriting, which was nice. But that has the same tenor of the black humor and anger, So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do this. We'll see,
So much of today's life happens on the web. Squarespace is your home base for building your dream presence in an online world. Designing a website is easy, using one of Squarespace's best-in-class templates. With the built-in style kit, you can change fonts, imagery, margins, and menus, so your design will be perfectly tailored to your needs. Discover unbreakable creativity with Fluid Engine, a highly intuitive drag-and-drop editor. No coding or technical experience is required. Understand your site's performance with in-depth website analytics tools. Squarespace has everything you need to succeed online. Create a blog, monetize a newsletter, make a marketing portfolio, launch an online store. The Squarespace app helps you run your business from anywhere. Track inventory and connect with customers while you're on the go. Whether you're just starting out or already managing a successful brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create and customize a beautiful website. Visit squarespace.com/Tetra and get started today.
From the time you finish a script and you're happy with it, how different might the movie be than what you're visualizing when you're writing?
They're all very. I mean, I think sometimes events take over. I'd say the movie is different from what the original was with Killers of Flower Moon. I think it might be a more important movie. I had leaned into the Western nature of it, and then Leonardo decided he didn't want to play the hero, and he was right because he was worried that I'm going to be the great white hope here, saving the Native Americans, and that's what the book was, and it just happens to be fact. But so we went away from that, and Marty did his work and saw the movie. He always was. We always tried together to get the culpability of everybody, that people would just walk over dead bodies. In other words, what is that all about? I mean, there's even a great trailer about saying, "Who is the wolf?" And that's the metaphor, right? You can spot the wolf. Don't worry. And I think they leaned into it the right way, and so that the movie doesn't have that sense of having to do what's sort of the white guy saving everybody. But it's not done in a kind of, I don't want to put her down, Rachel Maddow, but it's not done with headlines, It's done with great taste, I think. I think Marty's, he's an extraordinary artist, and I would work with him, and we're going to work again together. I'll work to the end of time with him, But he's not always faithful to what you did, so you have to have a pretty strong ego,
Well, that's what I wanted to ask about not being faithful. Are you ever surprised by the direction it takes, and do you ever come around to think, oh, this is actually better than what I had originally envisioned?
For sure. And I also think things have gone where they haven't gone as well as they could have.
For sure.
I did a movie called Lucky You that I never understood. I found out why later on, that the director had Alzheimer's, but I never understood why he wanted to do it. I figured, he's going to come in and do something it's about a love story set in Las Vegas with a poker player and Drew Barrymore and Eric Bana. And I thought it was pretty good. And I actually took it from, there was a movie that Elizabeth Taylor did with Warren Beatty called The Only Game in Town. And that was about her playing basically a hooker, even though they didn't call it that then. And he's just a degenerate gambler. And the end of the movie is quite beautiful, where he's sitting on the curb and water's running down the curb, and you figure he's just dead broke, man. He's got nothing left. And she sits beside him, and he sort of says, that's the way it goes, if you're going to be a gambler. And he starts taking out $100 bills and making them into little boats and running them down the river, right? So I guess it worked out. But that was supposed to be the feeling of it, what is luck and all that. And it didn't work. It was just no good. So I don't know. I guess I was disappointed, but I think you have to rely on the director who's going to realize something, You have to hope they have something. I mean, I have a sort of philosophy that, and I've worked with everybody, that you have to take a third way. There's your way, there's the director's way, and the director's always going to win. One of the stories I tell occasionally is I did a movie called, this was The Onion Field, actually, and I thought a great scene, and the director kept saying, it's not working. And I said, yeah, it's really great. You just shoot it. And he said, you know what, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to leave it in the script and not shoot it. And that was the end of that conversation. It wasn't very kind, and I don't think it was very brave of him, but that's the way it goes, So you got to figure out a way to be part of what they need to articulate what their vision is, And they're the boss. I mean, when it says a film by, I don't think it's bullshit. I think it's their film, It's like a musician, and it doesn't go any other way. I think, did a movie called Mank, which was about the guy fighting for credit with Orson Welles, on Citizen Kane. And he set the ball, no question, he set the boat off with the right architecture and the right journey, but director's got to take it there, And if you don't get there and get to the right place, it's not worth seeing.
Do you do a lot of research for the projects?
Tremendous amount. Yeah, I like God is in the details. You know that. Yeah, I do. But everything I read at that point is all grist for the mill, and that's why I'm back to, at 78 particularly, what are the things that are going to define, so I'm doing a thing called Rendezvous with Rama, which is an old Arthur Clarke book that they've made, it's not that they made 2001 out of it, but it was written around the same time. Same philosophy. And I have an astronaut that's been helping me, and he said when he went out of the spacecraft, he just laid back like he was in a bath and looked up at the stars, And so I said, okay. So if I can get that feeling, because I think the feeling of this particular piece really dovetails to the things I've been thinking about, that the thing that comes and interrupts these people's world doesn't have to have a reason. It might just be God. And some of the people who are like kind of religious believe in this 2130 that Jesus showed up sent by God from the planets. And he just showed up in, Palestine or Israel, wherever you'd like, and did what he did, and then they crucified him. He went back up to the planets, and that he's still doing that, So everybody adapts, to whatever their era is. But I think this overriding sense, and I don't think you can escape it when you get a particular age, doesn't mean you have to dwell on it to where it immobilizes you, but I think it spans your horizons, and that's a good way to say it, I guess.
When you're writing, let's say, a monologue for character, how important is the content of what they're saying versus this is a great line?
I mean, you would like to be, say, presidentially that you just want to put the, no, I know, but I'm sure your
There's no right answer.
In.
I mean, there's only your answer.
I think there might, I get you, but I mean, but I think it's kind of narcissistic to only dwell on what you think will last, Maybe the whole speech will last, and it's more important that way. But I don't know if I really think about it either way. I mean, I think I try to write what's human. Is this what I do? Someone called me a sappy dog heart. I try to write that will be remembered. I like the fact that I built a legacy of things that I think I chose pretty well. Not always. We've had some monster failures, but I think pretty well. And I still think I continue to choose pretty well. And I mean, I have other issues, so it gets more complicated. So my mother was very tough on giving love. And so I always felt I needed some validation, right? And I still do. And my wife says to me, 80 years old, you feel like you need validation. You need like an Oscar nomination. I said, I don't want to. But it's like I want to go call my mom and say, look at my report card. You know what I'm saying? So there's your psychiatry again. It's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm getting over it or not. I don't know. Yeah. I'd like to.
That's an interesting thing, though. When our parents pass away, who do you call? When you get good news, you don't have that feeling anymore.
No, you don't have that thing that you could just share, that you really love sharing, Yeah, I think that's true. I guess I think I do with my wife, maybe, She's a doctor and she's pretty supportive. But she doesn't quite get this world I'm in, it's just different. She relies strictly on science. Whatever you say has got to be accurate. You know what I'm saying? You can't just make it up. I remember Fincher being angry at me because in Benjamin Button I had some silly speech with Brad Pitt in the middle of the night at the hotel. I gave her some bullshit about how you have to steep tea and this and that, And David said, "This is such nonsense," And he left it in.
Have you ever had a mystical experience?
I think one. It ended up pleasant. It wasn't pleasant. I had cancer a couple times in my life. I've been very sick a lot. But I had cancer twice. And the first time I was just 32, and it was directly from my grandfather, colon cancer. And in those days, they just bombarded you. I mean, they just didn't really quite know, And I remember laying in bed, and I'm not religious, and I'm certainly not Catholic, and an angel showed up, and sort of form of a nun, kind of, and she says, "Time to go." And I said, I don't really want to go yet. And I love my wife and I love my kids. And can we just forestall this, And she thought about it and said, okay. So I don't know. That was my wish fulfillment, But it felt real. It felt real.
Beautiful.
I mean, the other thing, the other side of it, the bad side of it is when I think when I get afraid or I don't want to see certain things, I imagine rats are going around. I see a rat run across the ceiling or something, something weird like that. That's about as mystical. I haven't got, I think I feel more mystical when I'm writing, that I can feel what imbues me, what makes me soar and at least makes me feel like I'm soaring. And I don't know. I wish I could say I did mystical. I'm not sure I completely believe in magic. So I wish I did. So, I mean, I think I'd like to learn how to, honestly.
When you've had that feeling of soaring while you're writing, is it just that the lines are coming and it's like, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good? Describe it.
It feels like I love to go swimming in a lake in the summer where it's just cold and feels like you're coming alive, and that's what it feels like. And you don't have to judge it. And you don't even know, because it's so corny the way I do it. I say out loud the dialogue and the worst acting known to man. The voices never change, not any of that. And yet you feel like, wait a minute, you're not Mozart. This isn't coming right to you. You only have to erase a fucking note, But you do feel like you're imbued with something. I don't know what it is. And I guess that's a creative spirit that and if it works, it's great. Even if it doesn't work, if you can try it out, why not,
Do you always write dialogue out loud?
Pretty much. I say just characters. It's so bad. It's embarrassing.
So you'll basically act it out for yourself.
It's less acting. I sort of almost whisper it, to see, I don't know why, just to see if it feels right, I guess. And I also learned a long time ago, there was a director, Michael Cimino, and he had prepared a wallet for Mickey Rourke, so Mickey Rourke knew where he came from. I'm sure Mickey Rourke never looked at the wallet, but it had a fortune from a fortune cookie in there, a picture of his daughter, his draft card, and this and that. And his point was that every single character has to have their own voice. Every single character has to have their own psychological makeup, that they came from something, they're going to go somewhere. And I took that to heart. So I think that's a big key about with the dialogue kind of thing, that everybody sounds different and interesting and doesn't have A follow B and says something off the cuff. And I mean, in other words, where you try to make it as real as possible.
Do you know all of that about the characters before you start, or does their character come into focus as you're writing?
As I'm writing, pretty much, unless there's something so defined for them in a book or something where you don't want to make the audience go crazy, No, I think like this one I'm writing with this Rendezvous with Rama, it's a thing called that I've slowly kind of made this commander, this ship, into somebody that was not really there and whatever I felt he should be, And you just start describing things like, I think I wrote that he's very taciturn, but he has a great sense of irony or something, So wherever that took me, that was my first impression of him. And a lot of it's just what I will say is that I think every movie I wrote, except for Munich, began and ended with the exact same scene I wrote. Almost every one. Yeah.
And do you start with the beginning and the ending? Is that typical?
Typical. I always want to know where I am to begin with and where I end. The middle is a big mess. Have no clue, which is, I think, part of the fun. You get to take a journey, and discover people and things you'd never expect. If you do it well, great. If you don't do it so well, it's not so pretty. But it's, yeah, I think it's wonderful. And then I'll find that I'll really struggle over the first 25, 30 pages or 20 pages and think I'm just not going to get through this. And all of a sudden on page 70, you know what I'm saying? And then you're done. Something unlocks something. And I never fight it, which I think is what happens with people with when they get this fear of continuing, on the blank page and all that stuff, writer's block. I just change the weather. In other words, make it rain or snow, and all of a sudden you look at it differently,
Do you always change the weather for story, or do you ever do something to change your condition to allow the change?
I think I do both. Yeah, I think that will lead me to do something differently. Yeah.
Like, might you go for a drive or, do something different instead of just sitting at the desk?
That's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. I'm very hidebound and kind of, this has to do with, I think, with being born in the late 40s and being a 50s and 60s kid, and that look at it as a job in that way. I mean, I formally go to work. I get up, whatever time, same day as it's gotten earlier, as I've gotten older, and try to do the Marshall McLuhan thing, stretch out the amount of hours available. But this came for a little bit from John Cheever, who I'd read. Got up at 7 or 6:30, got dressed, put his hat on, his tie on, his suit on, took the commuter train into New York, had rented a small basement, or boiler kind of room place under an apartment building where he worked from, took his pants off, folded them really neatly, sat in his underwear, took his hat off, wrote. 12 o'clock, chime went off, got up, went and had a 3-martini lunch, came back, wrote till 4, put the suit back on, went to the computer, took the computer train home. And so he felt that was a job. I mean, there's a lot of artists do that, a lot don't, So I don't think there's no rule for it. The same way you asked about how do you approach these things and what would you, is everybody's different how they do it. I'm sure you find every musician you work with is different,
Can you work on more than one project at a time?
Try not to, but the good news would be if they start dovetailing, where you're rewriting one and starting another. I have the next year pretty well laid out. After that, we'll see,
In a world of artificial highs and harsh stimulants, there is something different, something clean, something precise. Athletic nicotine. Not the primitive products found behind convenience store counters. Not the aggressive buzz that leaves you jittery, but a careful calibration of clean energy and focused clarity. Athletic nicotine. The lowest dose tobacco-free nicotine available. Made entirely in the USA. No artificial sweetener, just pure, purposeful elevation. Athletic nicotine is a performance nootropic. Athletic nicotine is a tool for shifting mindsets. Athletic nicotine is a partner in pursuit of excellence. Slow release, low dose, gradual lift, sustained energy, soft landing, inspired results. Athletic nicotine, more focus, less static. Athletic nicotine, more clarity, less noise. Athletic nicotine, more accuracy, less anxiety. Athletic nicotine, from top athletes pushing their limits to artists pursuing their vision. Athletic nicotine offers the lift you've been looking for. Learn more at athleticnicotine.com/tetra and experience next level performance with Athletic Nicotine.
Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
Does the breakthrough moment happen at the beginning of a project? Like, let's say you're asked to adapt a book. You read the book, and as soon as you have an idea of this is my way in, is that the big breakthrough, or does it happen later?
It can do either. Like, I read a book called Damnation Spring. I was looking at the book that I assumed it was going to be about something it quite wasn't, but I'm going to make it about what I thought it was going to be.
That's great.
I thought it was about, I thought it was going to be about Moby Dick with the redwood trees. It's about a logger and his sort of cantankerous kind of guy, and cutting down trees, and it's not quite the story. And I wanted to make this guy be tall as redwood as his Moby Dick, and eventually. I don't want to give it away, but what I think he does with this. But I also like to, where, as I say, God's in the details, I love to go off on tangents. Like, I want to do what a life of a tree is, and why do trees survive nuclear holocausts, and how do trees move, how their roots join together, and all these things we just don't see or know about, There's a book called Overstory, it's spectacular that way, about sort of like short stories about trees and things you never thought about. And so I love that. So that's part of the, the excitement of doing something new. And then there are other times you just kind of founder along, and then all of a sudden something just hits you and you get it, and at least you think you get it. Well, you don't know till it's all said and done, and then you have to give it to somebody else and all that stuff. But once you write fade out, and you just feel pretty good for about an hour, and then you think you fucked the whole thing up, and you think you could do it all over again.
What's typical length of time that you'll work on a script?
I used to work about a year. I've cut that down just because I really want to get more things accomplished with limited time. So I think it's like 5-6 months now, probably, and that's probably shorter than I would rather, but I think I have to. And then I made the script shorter too. I used to do really long, like 180, 90, 200-page scripts.
Do you think in going from a year to 5 or 6 months for a script that the scripts have gotten better or worse?
I think it's the material. Probably some of it's just better because I think I've learned through experience how to say things which I before tried to say in 17 different words and now could say twice, and also have a certain, obviously, technique about how to tell who people are and identify their personality. But every single thing I write does sort of give the same problem. How are you going to articulate this in the best possible way, and how you can tell the story, and is the story going to mean anything? I want it to mean something, not to just fill up space,
Is every great movie about something bigger than what the story of the movie is?
I think so. I think it's something that's lasting. Yeah, I think you've done something of value. I think that's true. I hope that's true.
Is the theme of the movie the same as the moral of the story?
Well, that's interesting. Well, I happen to write toward theme, and I think theme is most important rather than story. Most people completely confuse story with theme. But I think you also have to know what the thing is eventually going to be about.
Tell me what the theme is. That's why I'm asking. Is the theme the moral?
I'd say that's a little facile. I think it's more than that, Rick. I think it's what makes something profound and not profound. And it's not for me to judge what's profound. I'd rather Bruce was alive to look at that. But I know on Killers of Flower Moon, Marty wanted to do this culpability about people being culpable with this destruction of these people. And how do we do that? And so it's really interesting to figure out how to do that. And I knew that made this thematically more than just this murder mystery kind of thing. This made it about the sort of sadness and the destruction and the quality of what human beings do to one another, the worst part and what could be the best, what's justice and all that. I mean, in other words, so I think it becomes where you'd like to make it feel profound. I mean, that's pretty arrogant to make you think you know what that is, but at least you to yourself, you feel like I've really said something here,
Can the theme always be reduced to a couple of sentences?
Should best of all, yeah, I think should. Yeah, I guess that's another thing I've really learned was, everybody's kid about less is more, less is more, less is more, less is more. I think, and I would like to learn more about that. I think still I probably overload my life and things I do, but maybe sitting and being quiet is fine too, And my wife says that, she says, don't take somebody not answering you on a text meaning anything. She says, just silence, and she's great that way. And I think I wish I could get that. It goes back to that validation. What the hell? They didn't answer me back, And the silence is what I'd love to get to. I think that's what I think I'd like to lead to. And maybe that seems a little cliche about wanting how you want to end things, but I'd rather end in quiet, in a certain way. Otherwise, it's just a fucking noise, man. It just seems too much.
Do you watch a lot of movies?
Yeah, I watch every day almost. And I'm going to go today. I go once or twice a week. Yeah, I love them. I mean, even if I don't like them, I like something about it. I like sitting in theater, big screen. I like something, 40 feet. I mean, not that I don't watch movies on television or my phone like anybody else, but yeah, I love that moment where something really moves you, or a sound. I mean, I remember in All Quiet on the Western Front last year, there was a sound of just music. I'm sure it was music as they were going into battle or something. It was so profound. I mean, it was profound. I've used too much, but it just soaked into your inside you, into your vertebrae. It's like that sound was so powerful. I mean, I'm such a I guess if I had two things that I didn't do in life, I wish I'd become a novelist, but I was always afraid. And I wish I had the ability to do music. Because I think musicians, which I said to Greg, are the most non-judgmental people. I don't know if you feel that way, but non-judgmental, carry their art with them, don't really care mostly about race of anybody. Just want that music to sound, and it's just transcendent to me. I don't know really how to. I wish I could describe it, And you know how.
There's always grass is always greener. I know that actors always wish they were musicians, and most musicians wish that they were actors.
Really? Is that true?
Yeah.
I didn't know that about musicians. I never knew a musician who wasn't basically, except for whatever their, problems with drugs or whatever else, trying to recreate experiences and get that feeling all the time. I never knew they wanted to be actors. I thought they were pretty happy with what they did, if they're successful. If you're not successful, it's a whole different world.
Have you ever been asked to work on an adaptation and read the book and just felt like, I don't see a way into this?
I've done it slightly differently. I've started it, and I realized I can't do it, and I sent the money back. I've done that like 5-6 times.
Mm-hmm.
And not because of the quality of the book. It just didn't. I thought I saw something in it that I just didn't ever see, and then I never thought it went where I'd like it to go, I guess, which might be just my arrogance, not the book's. Yeah.
And then the other way around, are there ever times where you'll see something that you think it's either not good or doesn't have much potential, and then it turns into something really great without your involvement?
Yeah, most times, actually. But the famous quotes are, bad books and bad plays make great movies. So, because they're sort of people ignored them. And I would give Forrest Gump that. I mean, the book, to me, rest his soul, the man who wrote it. But it's just farcical, sort of silly. And I'm not sure I made anything more than silly, but at least it had a heart to it,
Was it a popular book before the movie?
No, not much.
And how did you come to the book?
I came to the book through, I worked with Tom Hanks on what turned out to be a really bad movie that we had a whole different approach to, which was called The Postman, which was a post-apocalypse thing that I tried to do as Candide. He had 4 mules, and he said they were called John, George, Ringo, and I don't know, Sarah, what I'm saying? And it was funny. It was sarcastic. It was supposed to be sort of like Lilliput. It was like Gulliver. And he's in this, dystopian world, and he's supposed to be an ex-postman. And so it had this kind of whole tongue-in-cheek look to it, and also, I liked it. I don't know if it was any good, but then 10 years down the line, Kevin Costner made a very serious movie out of it, and I won a Razzie, which means you made the worst year movie of the year. So, I don't think you can quite know, but it has to, to me, and especially now, it really has to speak to me in some way that I feel like it can be additive to it. There's no point in just retyping it.
So did Tom bring you the book? Is that how it started?
No, the woman who had the book of The Postman also owned Forrest Gump. And they had tried a couple scripts with the author and somebody else at one of the studios. And she says, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Well, I like the way it transports you over the years and his kind of constant belief in God, the girl Jenny and his mother, it's kind of interesting. And him being challenged, which we couldn't do anymore. But I thought maybe I could say some things about how I felt about where I grew up and how I grew up and what the turmoil was in the world. And then the director's a stick in your eye kind of guy, but equal opportunity stick in your eye, and he doesn't care if you're Democrat, progressive. He puts, Marilyn Monroe's picture in the bathroom of the White House, that kind of thing with the Kennedys, and he just didn't care, and the thing struck a nerve, though, and even though I don't think it's funny how that movie lasted, boy. It's kind of amazing, People really grew to that. But you don't know. But as long as it occupies sort of the most important part of your life in that way, equal with your children and wife and everything. That's that. When you get up, you can't wait to go. I like to be able to know what I'm going to write the next day, so I don't have to be anxious about it. So I won't write that, but I'll just sort of scrap it out. And then be ready to write it the next day, so I know I have something to start with,
Yeah, I have almost the opposite, I think. I like having a schedule where I'm showing up to do something. But if I think too much about what it is that I'm doing, then I'm already working on it before I get there, and then it undermines it. So
Wow, that's interesting.
So
Yeah,
I try
that was
to
scary.
keep a distance from the work when I'm not in the moment with it.
Nice. I love that. I mean, I would be afraid of that. I would be afraid I wouldn't be able to get back into it or something. I don't know, that wouldn't carry over.
Yeah, I like that feeling of coming to it new.
I love that. Wow.
Like every day, like I've never seen it or heard it before.
Wow. But I do, see, I'm so hidebound that I'm opposite of you completely, is that I read from page 1 every day.
Wow.
So,
I think there's something to that, though, because context really is everything. And if you understand the flow of the information, I imagine it would be easier to continue it than to just pick it up where you left off.
Yeah. So it's like I just was looking here that I want him, I'm going to put into this particular Rama thing that I want him, his opening line to be, I am a navigator. So I love that, what that could mean, you know.
It's a great
line. I haven't thought about it, you know, and then all of a sudden I said, well, that unlocks a bunch of things, you know, what this guy wants to do. And I have a thing with him where his wife supposedly had died and he went back in the service, but people they can live to 140 and such. It's supposed to be 2130. But anyway, she said, you'll see me in your dreams. And he hasn't seen her in his dreams until he gets into a certain part of this alien ship they get into that has a water feature to it. And he gets in the water, and all of a sudden it opens up all these other things, like an hallucinogenic kind of thing, where he starts, seeing her. And I think it can be beautiful. I think it'd be beautiful.
That sounds great. I like also someone saying, you'll see me in your dreams. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I said somebody said that in a song, I think. I think in a song, yeah. Yeah, I get a lot from the music. One of the ones I took was, I don't know the group's name, you probably know, where he says over and over, I can't take my eyes off of you.
Yeah, it's a really famous song.
I just love that.
It's a standard. So there's so many different versions of it. I'm not sure which is like the original.
Yeah. This one was not a group I knew, but he says it like 30 times in a row, you know. And I use that in this thing I did with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, where first time he looks at her, he says, I can't take my eyes off of you. So I know that's a good romance line, you know.
How does poetry work its way into your work?
Well, I'm really well read, and I'm really interested in what the words are, one in front of the other. You know, why do people put these in this order? And some are so much better at it than others, you know. And that the poetry to me, I think, is a sense of feeling that it's the same sort of soaring you get. And then starting to believe that maybe this actually is poetry. I don't know if it is, but you start feeling like it could be, you know, which is pretty freeing that you're now writing something. But that can either dovetail or it can conflict with the director. Some love you to try to be as expansive as you can be with prose and poetry, and others don't like it. I mean, they feel like it inhibits their process. And for instance, David Fincher is, as I say, I think he's a savant in some kind. He's just a genius. But he likes things really logical. He wants me to fall away and like that, and you have to explain to him why it isn't. And I like that too. I mean, I think that really presses you into rethinking what you thought you could just sort of willy-nilly throw out there, you know, to the universe. And for him, he needs to understand it, and that it makes some sense what you put, and it adds to something else. While others are much more gracious and saying, go for it. You know, Marty's that way. Marty will let you, if you want to write the movie backwards, just let's try it, you know. Let's try it, yeah. The directors are interesting people.
Tell me about the different styles of the directors you've gotten to work with. How different are they? What do they expect from you, and what they're like to work with?
Well, Marty's very generous during the writing process, a little more reclusive when he's about to go make it. So he then takes over. I think he inhabits the movie then. That I think it's part of my job to have them understand the movie that they're going to make, oddly, you know. In other words, this is what I can tell you I think it is, and whatever you can add to that would be amazing, you know, if you have a point of view. Fincher's rough. We argue like crazy, but he has something in mind that I want to try to get to for him.
Tell me about an argument. Like, what's the kind of thing you would argue about?
He would say to me, he'd read it back to me and said, "This makes no sense." And I said, "What do you think? Everything you say makes sense?" That's how we'd have an argument. And he says, "Well, that's just your writer and you thinking you're going to bring out words that are going to, somehow attribute back to you." I mean, you get very personal. He also, I know he knows things about me with the validation stuff. And he said, "Oh, you want to win an Oscar," whatever it is. But no, I sat behind him during Mank and he would turn around, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, David." And he said, "Well, you're wrong about that, But we kind of fight it out and get to where we always love each other. He's the most loyal man I know. So he's that way. Denis is very visionary. He said that he felt that I was the kind of the spiritual quality of Dune, because I got that hallucinogenic, that whole tribal thing. And early, I worked with a man named Bob Mulligan who did Kill a Mockingbird. He was a very generous guy. Those guys in that era were very sort of Playhouse 90, if you remember that, or television.
Yes.
That's what they were steeped in. And I'm not talking about deep theater. I'm not talking about Glass Menagerie or something. But they got telling dramatic stories from stage plays in a way. They were television shows. Stuart Rosenberg was another one. He did Cool Hand Luke, and he was the one who introduced me to Paul Newman, who I became friends with for life. I walked on the set when I was like 19 or 20 they needed rewriting, and went down to Lafayette, Louisiana, and I bought a new pair of corduroys, and I had a new briefcase, and Paul said, "Our Savior's here." I don't think so. But we were friends for life then, And I stay friends with a lot of these people. I like to maintain relationships with them. I think they all expand my universe, I think, and in the main, a few are a little toxic.
You were saying about scripted versus ad-libbing earlier when you were talking about Star is Born. And in a way, it sounds like it stemmed from an ad-lib. You got them to talk to you, and then you organized it and refined it, but it starts with an ad-lib.
No, you're 100% right, and I think it started more with Bradley Cooper, first directing assignment, and not really, I'm not saying he doesn't know music, but it's not his life. He wanted to portray a character that he created. I suggested him he should use Sam Elliott's voice. That's the huskiness that he kind of has there. So I think I was going along. I rewrote that. I mean, because what they gave me, I just didn't like. And I said, I have to start from scratch. And I said, I'll do it really fast, but we'll have to do it together. So in 3 a.m, we were changing, but there was that ad-lib stuff. You're right. It was, or the improvisation would probably be better than ad-lib. Improvisational quality of it, but also it had an accuracy, because Lady Gaga knows what that life is. Bradley maybe doesn't know it to that extent.
I was going to say, other than the dialogue, how much descriptive writing do you do in a script?
A lot. Probably too much. But I think some directors like it because it establishes a tone. It gives kind of wonderful, I think, visual possibilities. I realized I was reading a thing I'd written about James Cook, the navigator, the explorer. And I was writing something about that he had docked his ship somewhere in the Antarctic and letting the men have a Christmas Eve celebration. And it got cold and they went down below, and he stayed up and he started singing Silent Night by himself. But I thought, I love that. But I said, I don't know if I have the boat right. And so I looked at the boats, and I forgot they have those oil lamps. So I put the oil lamps in, and they're rocking. And I said, that somehow refers to it. And then we cut from that to the spaceship in 2129. That's kind of a junky ship. It's supposed to be a warship. But it's very sterile. And the people inside are very sterile, and they're like monkish almost, because they go for 7 months without doing anything. And they're supposed to be putting these beacons up on asteroids to warn people about the asteroids coming. Anyway, it's quite different than the oil lanterns, So I love that. Yeah, so I do put a lot of prose in there, but I think it's my downfall in the sense of, because I want to be a novelist, so this is the way I can do it. People still let me do it. They don't let most other writers do it anymore. But I think it does impart to the director what I think it's going to look like. Some get annoyed, say, why do you have to talk so much? So I said, okay.
In an adaptation, how close do you feel like you need to stay to the original material?
Depends on how good I think the original material is, And then there's the other side of what does the audience expect? And I don't know that. Somebody's there. You're looking at somebody.
No, I thought I saw a feather out the window. It's strange.
Oh, I love that.
It's like I thought
that's not strange. That's Forrest Gump.
Well, it was a bird, but it was just a feather. So maybe it was a bird holding a feather, but I couldn't see the bird. Wow. I could just see the feather. It's like, that's strange.
That's interesting. I like that.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. I just put up a hummingbird feeder yesterday. I'm a big hummingbird person.
Beautiful.
And I had out my window where I lived in Malibu, in the colony there. I had a window that I didn't look at the beach because that's too distracting to me. I was looking at a tree, and these hummingbirds just kept coming and coming. And my parents died that particular year, and somehow my mother related to me hummingbird. And then I put it in Benjamin Button, where David Let It Stay, where Brad Pitt's on the sea, like the Atlantic Ocean, and he was on a tugboat and got crashed by a submarine, which was a true story. And he was on now like a boat that he was safe, and he looked down and he saw a hummingbird come up out of the sea. And he said, how did that get here? And I know how it got there. It's like a Robert Hunter lyric, right? Like, where did that come from? So, that's the adaptation part of it, yeah.
Are you superstitious?
I am, to a certain extent. Are you?
I don't think so. I think
I am.
I may have been at times. I don't think I am right now.
But most people don't think they're superstitious, even though they're superstitious about things. It's kind of funny. They think that's science in some way. I like to gamble, so I play horses. So I'm superstitious about that a little bit.
Do you go to the track on a regular basis?
Yeah, I go once a week. And I sit with guys who are 800 years old.
What's the first time you went to the track?
My grandfather, a little Russian man, barely spoke English, spoke Yiddish, and I spoke Yiddish at the time. And he would take me. He had 4 loves in his life. He loved boxing, which I did. I fought. And he loved the horses. I'd go with him when I was like 6, 7 years old. He loved baseball. We'd go stand on an apple box at Ebbets Field. And he loved fishing, and I still love fishing.
So did you grow up on the East Coast?
Yeah, Brooklyn.
I wasn't. For some reason, I thought you grew up on the West Coast.
Bedford-Stuyvesant. To a certain extent. Then I went to high school out here.
Has there ever been a window where you've stepped away from horse racing, or has it been a continuance since 6 or 7 years old?
I think I stayed with it the whole time. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but I like. But that would be superstitious stuff. I like all sports, I guess. So, but I think I am superstitious to a certain extent about some things. I'm not OCD about it. I won't count steps backwards or anything. But I think I am. Yeah, I'm interested that you're not. That's kind of interesting. But I'd love to know what you think of magic and stuff, which is close to superstition.
Well, I believe in magic, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think you might.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what. It's like someone, I can't remember who told me this, believes in a thing called manifestation, that if you manifest things, you can make them come true. And maybe that's true.
Well, I think we do.
Yeah, I guess we do.
We envisioned these lives, and they've appeared, and it's unbelievable. Doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense, but you're able to inhabit them, And that's how I feel about characters I write. I'm able to inhabit them, even though I may not know much about them, except for this psychological thing that everybody has that's different, And some things I don't understand because I don't understand the person, but I try to make him not understandable, and to some extent, but then you find that the character may understand himself better than you think you did. Those kind of things. I think there's a reality to writing these things,
Is it harder to write for women?
Probably is, but I haven't found it to be. I mean, I think they all have the same properties. I mean, I don't know. Then we get into whole sexual conversations with things, and I don't know if men or women. I don't think men or women are the same that way particularly. But I think I've written a lot of good women. I mean, I think that I think I wrote a beautiful character with Cate Blanchett and Benjamin Button, where she's a ballerina. I thought it was pretty lovely. But I always infuse these things with time. Like in that was like sort of the sliding doors idea, where if something didn't happen, another thing didn't happen, then she wouldn't have been hit by a cab, that kind of thing. And I love that. I love the randomness of things. And I did the same thing with Forrest Gump. Is he just flying around or is it destiny? I don't know the answer to any of that. So maybe I believe in magic. You're probably right,
Maybe.
Yeah.
I remember in Forrest Gump, I don't know if they were reenactments or actual old footage used. Do you remember?
Those are old footages, yeah.
Did you write it in the script that we're going to use this footage from this event?
In some cases, I didn't. They researched what would happen. Like I had, for instance, he's supposed to have been an All-American, and with the University of Alabama, they won the national title or something, and so he went and visited Kennedy, and I have him visit him, Lyndon Johnson, as a veteran from Vietnam, and he gets shot in the butt, and Lyndon Johnson makes a joke out of it. The interesting thing about that was that that was all brand new technique. The only one who had done anything like it was Woody Allen and Zelig. So Bob Zemeckis sort of perfected this, but if you look at it now, it's so rudimentary. It's still silly, But he's always this thing here has a whole longer conversation for us basically about AI, but this deep fake stuff, where the movie will have Tom and Robin Wright off stage say, "Hi, Mom and Dad, this is Margaret," and they'll walk into the living room, and they'll be 22 years old. Tom will look like he's right out of Big, and she'll look like she's out of Princess Bride. So I don't know. The morality of all that gets really tricky. I don't know I'm also curious how this will affect music.
Had you seen Zelig and realized I can use this technique in Forrest Gump? It's a really radical idea. This guy can be in these different places and we can use actual footage.
Yeah, I'm pretty visual, and I thought, well, I think we can do this. Yeah, I think if someone knows how to do it, we can put him in that scene. And even worse, no one's quite done it, but I could put words in people's mouths they never said. So John Kennedy could have said, "I love Hitler." I'm saying to him, whisper it to him. And it's obviously you're taking liberties there, but we had whatever he said, and he laughs and this and that. So they linked it to something that was part of another All-American ceremony, and then they just put him in there. Yeah, I don't know how I envisioned that. It just happened. It's just something that came out of the blue.
It's a radical idea, and I think it's as significant in the long-term success of the movie as anything else about it.
Oh, no question. No question. Yeah. Oh, I think so. And that's magical again. So
yeah, we just had never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And that idea of seeing a fictitious character in a familiar real-world situation is very interesting.
Yeah, it's very odd. And there was do you remember the comedian on the radio, Phil Henry?
Yes.
Yes, he did all those kind of different voices. He was kind of something nasty, a little racist, but somebody called me and said, "You need to listen to Phil Henry tonight." So he said he's announcing Forrest Gump is dead. So I said, I joined in and I said, "Hi, I'm the writer of Forrest Gump." And yeah, we're sad to say. And I see Quentin Tarantino just did that with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the character that Leonardo played, he said was dead, that he had died. So sometimes, it's confusing what's real, what isn't.
What are your all-time favorite movies as a fan?
I love a movie called Amarcord that Fellini made. It's like a dream. 2001 is probably my most favorite. Godfather 2, probably the ones that are traditionally, that most people would. I was talking yesterday with somebody. I used to, when I was much younger, I loved the movie Giant. I thought that just summed everything up for big movies. And I watch it again. It's not very good, But there's that James Dean being heroic and climbing up and getting oil, and Elizabeth Taylor, and there's something very American about it. I'm very American in my own way. I love things about America that are. I think it's very moving about people who put their lives in jeopardy, and then there's an ideal that we used to have, and I hope we still have. I don't know. We have a very rural place in Montana, and I'll talk to these guys, and we have completely different points of view, and fortunately we'll be able to get over them, just so we can have other things to talk about. But it's a shame the country is so divided about the things that we all care about. I don't know what that's all. I don't know what's happened. There's so much hatred and racism and everything else.
Are there any things that you firmly believed when you were young that now you've gone 180 on?
Yeah, I think, well, my parents were both dyed-in-the-wool communists. I was a red diaper baby. I can't tell you the number of times we stood in the rain to free the Rosenbergs. And I think their intentions were all good, but they forgave the same faults of those people that, you'd have to forgive all sorts of things. And my dad was a communist till his dying day, and he thought even Stalin was pretty great. So those are things that just don't resonate anymore that way. I think as American Communist Party members, they probably had some good beliefs about sort of socialism, how can you help people? And I think that was good. The other thing is this, since I've had cancer and stuff, I'm not afraid of dying, but I am so interested in what I thought was kind of constant, and it's not anymore, about as you get older, what are these things that come toward the end of things, and what can you expect and what you can't? And I think I probably earlier on felt, well, maybe it's X, Y, or Z. I even thought the other day, we were in London, outside of London, in this beautiful old cathedral, 9th century or something, and I said, what if it was all true? That maybe all this there was a Jesus. I mean, maybe that, never mind that, maybe all Buddhism, whatever it is, that all what we think is just, made up mythology, but what if some of it's true? I mean, maybe it could be, so why not? Why not open your mind? I remember Tom Hanks once yelling at me, he was a evangelical, I think, early on in his life, and we were talking about religion, and I was saying something kind of atheistic and kind of adamant about it. And he said, how do you know? And I said, I don't know. I don't know why I think I know. And I think that's the big difference. You assume you know so much, and then that's your ego, narcissism and all, and then you find out you are wrong about many things. It's like, I used to love to, this was before TSA and all, but I followed Joan Didion in the sense of I was actually friendly with her and John. But she would sit in airports and write about people as they came off of planes. That's how she would design characters. And I did that for a little bit. And then you realize, well, you're wrong about these people. You have certain ideas you're going to create.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantasy. Yeah. It's fun to do, but you're just always surprised. You're judging a book by its cover, and you figure this tattooed beast, and then all of a sudden they start talking about Keats or something. It's like, what the hell? I love that. I remember we were, Tupac Shakur came in to actually read for Forrest Gump to play Bubba. I didn't know who he was, and then he was renting a house in the Colony, and he was sitting on this stoop, and he said, Mr. Roth. I came over and I said, how are you? And I knew he was Tupac Shakur at that time, and he said, you don't remember I had tried out for that? I said, why would you try out for that? I said, I don't know. I wanted to try something different, and I want to find out who I was and this and that. And there you go, book by the cover, and then here's this great artist, yeah. Great artist, yeah.
Did you ever see Unforgiven?
Oh, yeah, I love that movie. Yeah, I love the writer, David Peoples. He wrote Blade Runner also.
Wow.
He's an amazing writer. And then I rewrote him on Munich. And I know him quite well. He's about my age. He's an incredible writer. There used to be a whole world of screenwriters that were only screenwriters, not writer-directors. So there's very few left. But Bo Goldman was probably one of the better writers ever. He won an Oscar for Harold and Melvin and for Cuckoo's Nest. We call both sides of the plate,
One of the things that was interesting, I remember when I saw Unforgiven, I bring it up because up until then, in a Western, you expected the good guy was a clear-cut good guy, and all of the attributes he had was noble, and the bad guy was the bad guy, and he was evil. And Unforgiven broke that mold.
Completely, yeah.
And it feels like maybe everything changed since then. That idea of just the good guy versus the bad guy, maybe that became obsolete with that movie.
I think it probably did. I mean, to some extent, except for they have big super action heroes, and so I don't know. Those were the black hat and the white hat. You wear the white hat, you're the hero. The black hat, you're not. I tried to write a movie for Clint Eastwood, a Western, his last Western, and Bradley Cooper got me involved. And he said, the only thing I don't want is you to do a sequel to Unforgiven. And I said, I get that. So what I did was invent him as a an ex-outlaw. That this is supposed to be 1906 at San Francisco, right after the San Francisco earthquake, and he's a kind of policeman in quote Chinatown for that era, and somebody comes back because he had been an outlaw in the olden days who he supposedly killed the person's father, and he came back and stabs him and this and that, and then he says he's dying, and they have this whole journey to take him home and what happens along the way, these people, and Bradley Cooper plays his son. But the big point of it was he's completely full of shit. He had never been an outlaw, and he created this whole myth for himself. And so when he had to get in trouble, kind of toward the end of this, he got himself out of it by being brave, and he didn't have to make up a story.
Wow.
But I love the whole idea. So did Clint. He said, "Oh my God, the idea of just pretending you're somebody and everybody giving you, your props for that, and it turns out to be a feet of clay." Yeah,
But then
great.
it turns around. It's beautiful.
Yeah, then
Beautiful
that's what I
idea.
did at the end. I turned it around for him. Yeah.
Would you say every story is a love story?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think, what is the only thing we can't define? Love. I mean, it's probably the most primordial, important thing there is, probably, right? I don't know if you can define it. I can't define it. Maybe other people can.
How far can you stray from the archetypical Hollywood movies, happy ending, romantic tension, conflict? Are those rules to follow, or can you break those rules?
Well, I think you can break any rule, but I think you always will end up, oddly, with the same Shakespearean structure. Like, the perfect example is Pulp Fiction. He told the story backwards and forwards, but he still had to have a beginning, a middle that has a beginning that states the problem, the middle that exacerbates it, has a catharsis, which leads you to the ending. And so I think it's harder to do that. But I think as we modernize things, like the great Charlie Kaufman would do things like Adaptation, where he's adapting the adaptation and making it part of his life and his brother's life, or an imagined brother, so it's wonderful complications, or Sunshine of the Endless Spotless Mind, all that. But you still have to, I always found, at least even in those, I could tell you the structure of them, so I think that's a constant. I guess it has to be. Maybe it has to be. But the ending stuff, I think the only truth I think in love stories that you should end where things are not resolved, that they feel either brokenhearted. Very rarely are happy love stories. You want to have a bittersweet ending where somebody can't resolve it and you can't bring it to fruition, whether someone dies or someone leaves, or you want a sort of wish fulfillment, hoping that in another world. I also believe, so here's magic. I believe that Francis Coppola and I were talking about this, that great movies great books, plays, music, whatever, inhabit you in this, like they live on the other side of the moon, and they're all continuing their lives. That the Godfather people are all out doing whatever they do in whatever movies you love, and they're there, and you can always just go pick them up and put them back in your pockets, And I love that idea.
It's beautiful.
I was once it didn't work out too well, but I did Cat in the Hat. And I started that he was one of these kind of magical creatures that lived on the other side of the moon and would get a phone call, "We need your help," kind of thing, But the only thing I loved about that script was, I think it was a good script altogether, but I rhymed every word of it like a Seuss book. I love it.
Was it going to be animated or no?
No, it was live action, and they ended up doing a really, I thought, bad movie with Jim Carrey, just over the top stuff. But what I made, it was primal, that the mother was pregnant and the children were very jealous and afraid of what was coming into the house. And so the thing one and thing two, all this stuff, thing one and all that. It's kind of great. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Tell me about the old days in New York, the experimental film world.
Oh, I love that. I was really part of that. I was going to NYU Film School, and I gravitated down to, actually I was an English major to begin with at Columbia, but gravitated down to this. Everything was an alphabet city, below St. Mark's Place. And Bob Downey Jr., Ed M. Schuyler, all these people doing these things. And place called the Millennium Film Workshop where you could just move around rooms. And
Was this in the 60s?
like 68, 67, 65. Yeah, that whole era. Andy Warhol, some of his people were there. I knew some of them. I know Moriarty and a few other people. But I knew Bob Downey I worked for on like 4 movies. They were all insane. Bob Downey Sr. And but all these really interesting artists. But it's interesting how they just disappeared. I don't know. Some just got old, obviously, but they were a continuation, I think, a lot from Jack Kerouac and all that.
I was going to say beatniks.
Yeah, beatniks, basically. That's like Bob De Niro's mother was a beatnik. She always wore black and that whole thing.
How has the movie business changed over the course of your life?
Well, the loss of theaters. I mean, the idea that not to watch a movie in a theater is the most important thing. After that, it would be, there used to be personal relationships. You may not even like the people, but you sort of knew everybody. There was a lot less content providers. There were probably 7, whatever the big studios were.
Was it just a smaller business overall? Smaller
world, felt like a high school. But now it's a big high school. You sort of knew your place in it, what you wanted to get to, all that. But if I had this happen recently, that if somebody decided not to do a project of yours, saying, I'm going to pass on this, right? And they would call you up and tell you why, or it's just not for me. It's not my even if it's that simple, not my cup of tea. Whatever it is, but I appreciate you trying, that kind of thing. Now you never hear from anybody. It's just your agent says they're not going to do it. The personality. That's me. That's how I felt. I mean,
it feels like less of a human business.
Yeah, exactly.
More commerce than
and it's become even the rallying cry, which is sad, is that everybody says nothing matters, and that's a tragedy to me. I'm sorry, because I think it should matter. What you're doing, what you're saying, even if it's not my cup of tea, it doesn't matter. Write the best action movie, write the best Star Wars, whatever you want to do. It's just, I don't know. I don't know about the younger people the way I wish. My son's young. He's a director now, and my other son's a wonderful writer, and they have different looks at things.
When you're writing a character, do you typically have an actor in mind to play it?
Not mostly. No, I don't like to do that too much. Sometimes it's part and parcel of the deal. Like I knew Tom Hanks was going to be Forrest Gump, so he was great because he could go in and pitch the thing. He said, I'm sitting on a bench and I'll do all that stuff as an actor. I would prefer, I have a general idea, and then you got to get more.
Is that a common thing for an actor and a writer to get together and put something together and then pitch that as opposed to coming from a director?
It feels to me like it is. I don't know anymore, Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. But I still do. I'm like, when we're done here, I'm going to Zoom with Jeremy Strong, that actor. And we have, I think, a pretty great idea. But maybe we'll figure it out with him. I'll be glad to do it with him, But it's more unusual with actors. Actors are good because they're only busy for like 4 months out of the year, or, and then they have time. Directors are impossible because they, it's a year and a half of their lives or whatever, 2 years. And so if you don't get it done, you ain't seeing them for 2 years. They'll be doing something else,
Yeah. And it also seems like they're so in for 2 years on a project that after it, it's like they're not even themselves.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I had opportunities to direct when I was younger, and I made a decision I'd rather stay with my children, That's not this, I'm so heroic, but that's what I decided, because you're gone. You're just gone. You're missing their lives, and they know it. But something else is more important to them.
Did you always want to be a writer from the beginning?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've toyed with, one point I said, I think I want to be a doctor, which was ridiculous. I can't even add 6 and 8. And said, I think I'll go back to school and take all those courses, the organic chemistries, all that, and then go to some bad medical school like Grenada or Yankton or something, I mean, what I admire about your life, as little as I know about you, is that you at least are experiencing so many things, and I wish I'd experienced more things.
Well, I am now. I didn't for the majority of my life.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I was sat in a dark room for 18 hours a day for 30 years.
Okay. Oh, my God. I'm sorry. Or I'm not sorry, whatever. You probably learned a lot from that. Yeah. I would never have that discipline.
No, this is a new adventure. I realized I can do my work anywhere.
Anywhere.
And I might as well do it in a beautiful place. And I first had that revelation when I started working in Los Angeles versus New York, because even though I would still work all day, it felt like I was on vacation compared to being in New York.
I got you. Wow. Well, my sort of regret is so like juvenile. It's like romantic, right? I wish I had had that romantic year in Paris with whoever, you know, or just on my own, or, you know, I never did those things, or, you know, London, whatever, you know, Ireland, and it's not going to happen, you know, so all of a sudden.
It can. I mean, it
No,
would
it
just
can.
be, it'd
I
be
know
a
what you're
different
saying.
one. It would be the different version of a romantic year in Paris. You can do that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. No, you're so right. I sort of wish I had done when I was 30, you know what I'm saying? I don't know why. It was just what I had to my experiences. I always wanted my life to be like a Jack London flyleaf of his novel. Instead, he was a fisherman and whatever else. He went to the Alaska and all that stuff, you know. And that's creating a personality. I guess I'm not, you know.
It all worked out.
It all worked out. Exactly. If I would just get that in my head, you know, because there's too many small things. It's like my mother would say to me, don't sweat the small stuff, you know, and she's so right. And I sweat the small stuff still, though. It's like, I wish I could stop this nonsense about things that don't matter, you know. I'm a little better with it. I had a whole thing, I won't mention what it was, but this whole weekend I was like kind of upset about something, and I realized this is so fucking stupid. What in the world? And then you get yourself into a situation where I was mad at somebody, and then they texted me, and should I ghost them and all that whole thing? You know, it's like so petty and ridiculous.
So juvenile.
Oh, so juvenile. So I did.
That's amazing.
For the moment.
That's
He'll
amazing.
get back. Yeah, that's funny.
Tetragammaton is a podcast. Tetragammaton is a website. Tetragammaton is a whole world of knowledge.
What may fall within the sphere of Tetragrammaton? Counterculture? Tetragrammaton. Sacred geometry? Tetragrammaton. The avant-garde? Tetragrammaton. Generative art? Tetragrammaton. The tarot? Tetragrammaton. Out-of-print music? Tetragrammaton. Biodynamics? Tetragrammaton. Graphic design? Tetragrammaton. Mythology and magic? Tetragrammaton. Obscure film? Tetragrammaton. Beach culture? Tetragrammaton. Esoteric lectures? Tetragrammaton. Off-the-grid living? Tetragrammaton. Alt spirituality? Tetragrammaton. The canon of fine objects? Tetragrammaton. Muscle cars? Tetragrammaton. Ancient wisdom for a new age. Upon entering, experience the artwork of the day. Take a breath and see where you are drawn.